We have received intelligence. Step aside now.
You are not coming through.
Control, we have an obstruction at the entrance.
The ice sang beneath Maya Richardson's blades at 5:47 a.m., that perfect crystalline whisper that only came when body and surface moved as one. The Detroit Ice Arena was empty except for her and her coach, the building wrapped in the cathedral-like silence of pre-dawn when the world hadn't woken yet. Maya's triple axel was flawless, 3.5 rotations suspended in air, her body a study in controlled power, landing clean with the kind of technical precision that had scouts calling her generational. At 23, she was America's best shot at figure skating gold in the 2026 Winter Olympics in Milan, Italy. Just 72 hours away from boarding that plane. Just 3 days from the moment she'd been working toward her entire life. If you're ready to see institutional racism taken down like this video, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. And if this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button right now because you won't want to miss tomorrow's story of cops messing with the wrong people and finding out. Let me know in the comments if you enjoyed this story. She was born in Detroit to Jamaican immigrants Joseph and Marjorie Richardson, who'd fled economic collapse in Kingston in the late 1990s and built a life in America through sheer determination and backbreaking work. They'd naturalized when Maya was 6 years old, a ceremony she still remembered, her small hand raised, her father's proud tears, the weight of belonging finally settling into place. Maya had grown up American. She'd attended Detroit public schools, excelled in everything she touched, but found her calling on ice. Figure skating wasn't a sport where girls who looked like her were supposed to succeed. The costs were prohibitive, the culture exclusionary, the stereotypes suffocating. But Maya's talent was too explosive to ignore. She'd clawed her way up through underfunded programs and borrowed equipment, through coaches who doubted her and competitors who whispered she didn't belong. She'd won nationals at 19, world championships at 21. And now, at 23, she was 3 days away from Olympic gold. Her coach, Patricia Moss, stood rinkside with a stopwatch and clipboard, watching with the critical eye of someone who'd been training Olympians for 30 years. Patricia was 56, white, silver-haired, sharp as a razor. She'd coached champions before, but Maya was different. Maya was the kind of athlete who came along once in a generation. Someone who didn't just execute techniques but transcended them, who turned athletic performance into art. Patricia had staked her reputation on Maya, had fought with USA figure skating officials who questioned whether Maya had the right look, the right background, the right pedigree for Olympic glory. Patricia had shut them all down with results. Maya's scores spoke for themselves. Her performances were legendary. And in 3 days, Patricia would watch her students stand on that podium in Milan and prove every doubter wrong. The morning practice was routine. Maya ran through her short program sequence twice, then her free skate combinations, her body moving with the muscle memory of 10,000 hours of training. Patricia called out corrections, a hand position here, a landing adjustment there, but mostly she just watched, allowing herself the quiet satisfaction of knowing her work was done. Maya was ready. She'd been ready for months. Now it was just about maintaining peak condition, staying healthy, keeping her mind focused. The Olympics were a mental game as much as a physical one. The pressure could crush even the most talented athletes. But Maya had something most of them didn't. She had hunger. She had the memory of every person who'd told her she couldn't, every door that had been closed in her face, every microaggression and dismissal and quiet humiliation. She carried that fuel with her onto the ice, transformed it into power, into grace, into performances that left audiences breathless. At 5:52 a.m. the rink doors burst open with shocking violence. 6 figures in tactical vests stormed into the building, their boots heavy on the rubber mats, their presence shattering the pre-dawn quiet like a brick through glass. Their faces were obscured by dark masks. On their chests, in bold white letters that seemed to glow under the fluorescent lights, were the letters that made Maya's stomach drop. U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. They moved with military precision, fanning out across the entrance, blocking all exits, their hands hovering near their belts with the practiced readiness of people accustomed to confrontation. The lead agent was thick-necked, broad-shouldered, his voice cutting through the cold air like a blade. "We're looking for Maya Richardson. We have an administrative warrant regarding her immigration status." The words hung there, absurd and terrifying, impossible to process. Maya stood frozen at center ice, her water bottle halfway to her lips, her mind unable to catch up with what was happening. Immigration status? She was born in Detroit. Detroit Medical Center, August 2002. She had a birth certificate filed with the state of Michigan. She had a U.S. passport in her apartment. She had credentials to compete for Team USA in 3 days. She'd voted in every election since turning 18. She'd paid taxes. She was as American as anyone born on U.S. soil with documentation to prove it. This had to be a mistake. A clerical error. Some kind of bizarre confusion that would be cleared up in minutes. But the agents weren't acting like people who'd made a mistake. They were acting like people on a mission. Patricia's clipboard clattered to the ground. Her face transformed from calm professionalism to protective fury in the space of a heartbeat. She stepped between the Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents and the ICE, her body language shifting from coach to guardian, her voice sharp and unyielding. This is a private facility. You can't just storm in here. This athlete is preparing for the Olympics. The Winter Olympics. In 3 days. Whatever you think you're doing, you're making a catastrophic mistake. The lead agent cut her off with bureaucratic indifference. Ma'am, we're federal agents with U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. We don't need your permission. We have credible information suggesting Ms. Richardson's citizenship documentation contains discrepancies. An anonymous tip indicated she may be in the country unlawfully. Anonymous tip. The words hit Maya like a physical blow. Someone had called Immigration and Customs Enforcement on her. Someone had reported her as undocumented, as someone who didn't belong. The violation of it, the cruelty, made her hands shake. Patricia's response was immediate and absolute. I don't care what anonymous tip you received. You're not approaching my athlete without a judicial warrant and proper authorization. This is private property. She's under USA figure skating jurisdiction. You want to question an Olympic athlete 72 hours before the games? You'd better have more than administrative paperwork and lazy police work. The lead Immigration and Customs Enforcement agent stepped closer, his frustration beginning to show. We have an administrative warrant. That's sufficient under federal law to question individuals regarding their immigration status. Ms. Richardson needs to come with us for processing and verification. Patricia didn't move. She was maybe 5'4", 120 pounds, but in that moment she was an immovable wall. She's not going anywhere with you. Not without legal counsel. Not without proper verification. You want to detain her? Show me a warrant signed by a judge. Show me probable cause that isn't based on someone's anonymous phone call. From the back office, drawn by the commotion, Lou Castellano emerged. He was the rink manager, 62 years old, a former hockey player with shoulders like a linebacker and a protective streak a mile wide. This was his building. These were his people. He took one look at the scene. 6 masked agents, Patricia in defensive stance, Maya frozen on the ice like a deer in headlights, and positioned himself next to Patricia. What the hell is going on? You got a warrant? The lead agent attempted to respond, but Lou cut him off. Not an administrative warrant. A judicial warrant. Signed by a judge. You got that? Because if not, you're trespassing on my property and I'm asking you to leave. No. The second Immigration and Customs Enforcement agent, younger, Latino, muscular, stepped forward with barely contained aggression. Sir, we can arrest you for obstruction of a federal investigation. Lou crossed his arms, unflinching. Go ahead. Arrest a 62-year-old rink manager for protecting an Olympic athlete 3 days before the games. See how that plays on CNN. I've got high-definition security cameras covering every inch of this building. Every second of this is being recorded and backed up to cloud storage. You touch me, you touch her, you touch anyone in this building without proper authorization and the footage goes viral in minutes. More people were emerging now, drawn from locker rooms and training areas by the raised voices and the unmistakable tension. Derek Martinez, one of the assistant coaches, a former competitive skater who'd trained alongside Maya in their junior years. Sarah Chin, the biomechanics specialist who'd helped Maya refine her technique. Elena Volkov, Maya's choreographer, a tiny woman who'd survived authoritarian crackdowns in her home country and recognized the scent of overreach when she encountered it. Marcus Webb, the physical therapist, a former Marine built like a tank. They materialized in the space between the Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents and the ICE, their bodies shifting subtly to form a loose semicircle, a human barrier that hadn't been planned or rehearsed but emerged from pure instinct, collective instinct to protect one of their own. The lead agent radioed for backup. "This is Unit 7 at the Detroit Ice Arena. We have interference. Multiple individuals obstructing. Requesting additional units." The radio crackled back with static and a response that backup was en route. Estimated arrival 12 minutes. Patricia caught that, 12 minutes. 12 minutes to hold this line. She spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Your own people are telling you to wait for backup. That tells me you don't have the authority to proceed alone. So you can either arrest all of us for obstruction, on camera with the whole world watching, or you can wait for your supervisors to arrive and explain why you raided an Olympic training facility without proper verification." On the ice, Maya stood trembling, her legs suddenly unsteady, her breath coming in short gasps. She thought of her parents working double shifts at the auto plant to afford her coaching fees. She thought of her mother cleaning houses on weekends, her father picking up extra security shifts, both of them sacrificing everything so their daughter could chase this impossible dream. She thought of every morning practice at 4 a.m., every competition where she was the only black face in a sea of white competitors, every time a judge scored her lower than her performance deserved, every whisper that she didn't have the right look for the sport. She'd pushed through all of it. She'd proven herself 1,000 times over. And now, 3 days before the Olympics, Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents were treating her like a criminal based on an anonymous phone call. The standoff stretched into minutes that felt like hours. The agents attempted to maneuver around the barrier, to sidestep toward the ice. Lou shifted left. Derek moved right. Sarah closed the gap. Marcus stood like a wall. The barrier was fluid, responsive, unyielding. One of the Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents, a woman in her 40s with hard eyes, addressed the group with barely controlled fury. "You're all committing a federal crime right now. Obstruction of a federal investigation. We can arrest every single one of you." Patricia's response was calm and devastating. "Then do it. Arrest 7 people for protecting an Olympic athlete. Arrest coaches and staff for demanding you follow proper procedure. Make that your headline. I'm sure Immigration and Customs Enforcement's Public Relations Department will love explaining this one." Elena spoke up, her thick Eastern European accent cutting through the tension. "I have seen this before. In my country. Government agents, no warrants, just fear and intimidation. We did not let them win there. We will not let you win here. You want to take her? You go through all of us." The young agent, clearly uncomfortable with how the situation was escalating, tried a different approach. "Ms. Richardson, this doesn't have to be difficult. We just need you to come with us for verification. It's routine processing. If your documentation is in order, you'll be released within hours." Patricia responded before Maya could open her mouth. "She's not saying one word without legal counsel present. Not one word. You want to question her? Contact USA Figure Skating's legal department. Contact the Olympic Committee. Go through proper channels. But you're not interrogating her here now without representation." The lead agent's frustration was palpable now. His body language shifted from confident authority to irritation, his movements jerky, his voice tighter. "Ms. Richardson is the subject of a federal immigration investigation. We have the authority to detain her for questioning. Your interference is making this situation worse for everyone involved." Lou pulled out his phone and began recording video. "Making it worse? You stormed into a private training facility before 6 a.m., terrified a 23-year-old woman, and are threatening to arrest people for asking you to follow the law. The only people making this worse are you." Maya's mind was racing, spiraling through worst-case scenarios. What if Immigration and Customs Enforcement detained her? What if they held her for processing and she missed her flight to Milan? What if this anonymous tip, this bureaucratic nightmare, cost her the Olympics? She'd worked her entire life for this moment. Every sacrifice, every early morning, every injury pushed through, every doubt overcome, all of it leading to Milan. And now 6 masked strangers with badges were threatening to take it all away. The injustice of it burned in her chest, mixing with terror and disbelief. She wanted to scream. She wanted to demand answers. But Patricia's words echoed in her mind. "Don't say anything, not without a lawyer." So she stood silent on the ice, tears beginning to stream down her face, her body shaking with adrenaline and fear. Derek called out to her, his voice gentle but firm. "Maya, it's okay. We've got you. You're not alone. Don't say anything. Just stay where you are." Sarah was already on her phone, calling USA Figure Skating's emergency legal hotline, her voice urgent as she explained the situation. Marcus positioned himself more firmly in front of the lead agent, his former Marine training evident in his stance, calm but unmistakably ready. Elena moved closer to the ice, putting herself directly between the agents and Maya, her small frame somehow radiating defiance. The Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents tried once more to push through the barrier. The second agent attempted to go around Marcus, shoulder angled to slip past. Marcus didn't budge. "Son, I spent 20 years in the Marine Corps. I know what legal authority looks like. This isn't it. You don't have a judicial warrant. You don't have probable cause beyond an anonymous call. You have administrative paperwork that doesn't give you the right to detain anyone without verification. So you can stand down or you can try to move me. Your choice." The young agent backed off, clearly unwilling to escalate to physical confrontation. The radio crackled again. "Unit 7 backup is delayed. Traffic incident on I-94. Legal department is assessing the situation. Hold your position. Do not proceed without authorization." The words hung in the air. Do not proceed without authorization. Patricia seized on it immediately. There it is. Your own chain of command is telling you to stand down. You don't have authorization to do what you're trying to do. So you can wait for your supervisors to arrive and clean up this mess, or you can leave now and save everyone the embarrassment. The standoff had now lasted 23 minutes. Students were beginning to arrive for early morning sessions, parking in the lot outside, their confused faces visible through the windows as they realized something was wrong. Lou made a decision. He walked to the entrance and locked the main doors from the inside, then turned to address the gathering crowd outside through the glass. "Practice is cancelled this morning. Everyone go home." He didn't want civilian witnesses getting caught up in whatever was about to happen. The agents noticed and the lead agent's jaw tightened. "You just locked us in. That's unlawful detention." Lou's response was measured. "You're free to leave any time you want. But you're not proceeding further into my building without proper authorization." Inside Maya's mind, time had become elastic, stretching and compressing. She thought of her naturalization ceremony when she was 6 years old, standing in that courtroom with her parents, her small hand raised, swearing the oath of citizenship. She'd been so proud. She'd felt American in that moment, truly American with all the rights and protections that came with it. She thought of her U.S. passport, the one she'd used to travel to competitions in Canada, Japan, Russia, France. She thought of her birth certificate filed away in a safety deposit box. She thought of every tax return she'd filed, every election she'd voted in, every moment she'd lived as a full citizen of this country. And now 6 strangers were treating all of that as suspect, as fraudulent, as something to be verified before they'd believe she belonged. The grief hit her then, sharp and unexpected. Not just fear but grief. Grief for the illusion of safety she'd been carrying. Grief for the belief that her citizenship, her documentation, her achievements would protect her from this. She'd been naive. She'd thought that being exceptional would be enough. But standing here now, watching these agents treat her like a threat, she understood something she'd been too optimistic to see before. For some people, no amount of documentation would ever be enough. For some people, she would always be suspect. Always foreign. Always other. No matter what she achieved. No matter how many times she proved herself. The reality of it settled into her bones like ice water. Patricia glanced at her watch. 28 minutes since the agents arrived. Sarah ended her phone call and reported to the group. USA Figure Skating's legal counsel is conferencing with their immigration attorney. They're sending someone to the rink immediately. 30 minutes. They said to keep her here, don't let her leave with anyone, don't let her answer any questions. The immigration attorney is also contacting the Olympic Committee and the State Department. This is about to become an international incident. The lead immigration and customs enforcement agent's face darkened. The State Department has no jurisdiction over domestic immigration enforcement. Patricia's smile was razor-sharp. "Want to bet?" Maya Richardson is a credentialed Olympic athlete representing the United States in an international competition in 3 days. You detain her, you disrupt that, and it becomes a diplomatic issue. Italy's Olympic Committee will want to know why Team USA's figure skating hopeful is being held. The International Olympic Committee will have questions. And every major news outlet in the world will be running stories about how immigration and customs enforcement prevented an American athlete from competing. The calculation was visible on the lead agent's face. He'd come here expecting routine compliance, expecting to pick up someone who wouldn't have the resources or knowledge to fight back. Instead, he'd walked into a fortified position with cameras rolling, legal counsel incoming, and the potential for massive public backlash. His radio crackled again. Unit 7, this is command. What's your status? The lead agent responded, voice tight. Multiple individuals obstructing. Subject is refusing to cooperate. Legal counsel is apparently en route. The radio response came quickly. Stand down. Do not proceed without supervisor authorization. Await backup and legal assessment. Acknowledge. The lead agent's jaw clenched. Acknowledge. Standing down. The shift in the room was immediate. The agents weren't leaving, but they also weren't advancing. They'd hit a wall, bureaucratic, legal, and physical, and they knew it. Patricia allowed herself a small breath of relief, though she didn't move from her position. The barrier remained intact. Minutes crawled by. The agents stood near the entrance, occasionally speaking into their radios, their frustration growing more visible with each passing moment. Outside, more people had gathered, early morning skaters who'd been turned away, curious staff from neighboring businesses, a few early joggers who'd noticed the commotion. Someone had started filming on their phone through the windows. Lou noticed and made a mental note. The footage would be circulating soon. There was no putting this back in the bottle. At 34 minutes into the standoff, a white SUV pulled into the parking lot. A woman in a sharp suit emerged. Rebecca Tran, immigration attorney, briefcase in hand, moving with the purposeful stride of someone who'd done this before. Lou unlocked the door to let her in, then immediately locked it behind her. Rebecca assessed the scene in seconds. The masked agents, the human barrier, Maya on the ice looking terrified, and her expression hardened. She'd seen this pattern before. She knew exactly what was happening. She approached the lead immigration and customs enforcement agent with professional directness. I'm Rebecca Tran, legal counsel for Ms. Richardson. Let me see your warrant. The agent handed over the administrative warrant, a single sheet of paper with bureaucratic language and stamps. Rebecca read it in 30 seconds, then looked up with barely concealed contempt. This is insufficient for detaining a U.S. citizen. You have no judicial warrant. You have no probable cause beyond an anonymous tip. And you've violated multiple protocols by entering a private facility without coordination or verification. I'm formally instructing my client not to answer any questions. He will not be leaving with you. If you have legitimate concerns about her immigration status, you can submit a formal inquiry through proper channels, which will be answered with complete documentation proving her citizenship. But this ends now. The lead agent attempted to argue. We have the authority under. Rebecca cut him off. No, you don't. Not without verification. Not without probable cause that goes beyond someone's phone call. You want to detain her? Get a judicial warrant. Get a judge to review your evidence and determine there's legitimate grounds. Until then, my client is exercising her Fifth Amendment right to remain silent, and I'm exercising my professional obligation to protect her from unlawful detention. The second supervisor vehicle arrived at 41 minutes. A dark sedan, official plates. A woman in business attire emerged, clearly senior to the field agents. She entered the building and immediately took control of the situation, speaking tersely with the lead agent, reviewing the administrative warrant, listening to Rebecca's objections. The conversation was clipped, professional, ending with the supervisor turning to address the room. This operation is being suspended pending review. All agents will return to base for debriefing. The lead agent started to protest, but she shut him down with a look. That's an order. The immigration and customs enforcement agents began filing out at 6:47 a.m., nearly an hour after they'd arrived. The lead agent paused at the door, looking directly at Maya. This isn't over, Ms. Richardson. You'll be hearing from us again. Rebecca stepped forward. Any further contact with my client goes through me. You have my card. Don't approach her directly again. The agents left, their boots heavy on the pavement, their vehicles pulling away with lights still flashing. The moment the doors closed behind them, the human barrier dissolved. Maya's legs gave out. She collapsed onto the ice, sobs racking her body, the adrenaline crash hitting her like a freight train. Patricia was there instantly, skating out to her, arms around her, fierce and maternal. "You're okay. You're safe. They're gone." But Maya wasn't okay. She was shaking uncontrollably, gasping for air, her mind unable to process what had just happened. Derek and Sarah skated out to help, the three of them supporting Maya as she tried to stand. Elena stood at the barrier, tears streaming down her own face, whispering something in her native language that sounded like a prayer. Rebecca approached the ice's edge, her professional demeanor softening slightly. "Maya, I know this was traumatic, but you did everything right. You didn't engage. You didn't answer questions. And you had people who protected you. Now we need to figure out what triggered this and make sure it doesn't happen again." Lou was already pulling security footage, downloading it to multiple drives, ensuring they had evidence of everything that had occurred. Marcus was calling the Olympic Committee's security liaison, reporting the incident formally. The machinery of institutional protection was kicking into gear, but for Maya in that moment, it all felt too little too late. Rebecca Tran worked quickly. Within 2 hours she'd pulled every piece of documentation related to Maya Richardson's citizenship. Birth certificate, naturalization records for her parents, social security records, passport applications, tax returns, employment history. She spread it all across a conference table in Lou's office, where Maya sat wrapped in a blanket, still shaking periodically, Patricia beside her holding her hand. "Everything is in order," Rebecca said, her voice matter-of-fact. "You're a U.S. citizen. Born in Detroit. Your parents naturalized legally when you were 6. There's no question about your status. None. So the question is, why did Immigration and Customs Enforcement come after you?" Rebecca requested disclosure on the anonymous tip through formal legal channels, leveraging her contacts in federal immigration departments. It took 6 hours, multiple phone calls, and thinly veiled threats of litigation, but eventually she got access to the Immigration and Customs Enforcement case file. What she found made her blood run cold. She returned to the rink that evening, where Maya and her team had remained, too shaken to leave, too afraid the agents might return. Rebecca sat down across from Maya and delivered the news with careful precision. "The anonymous tip reported you as undocumented. Immigration and Customs Enforcement ran your name through their databases and found a match. A deportation order from 2013. But the order isn't for you. It's for someone named Maya Renee Richardson, deported to Jamaica in 2013 after being detained during a workplace raid in Florida." Maya's face went white. That's not me. I was in high school in 2013. I was competing at junior nationals. I've never even been to Florida." Rebecca nodded. "I know. The match is wrong. Catastrophically, negligently wrong. But here's what happened. Immigration and Customs Enforcement saw the name match and didn't verify anything else. They didn't check your date of birth, which is different. They didn't check your social security number, which is different. They didn't review your employment or educational records. They just saw the name and assumed you were the person from the 2013 deportation order." Patricia's voice was dangerously quiet. "They raided an Olympic training facility based on a name match alone? Without any verification?" Rebecca's expression was grim. "That's exactly what they did. And it gets worse. The Maya Richardson from the deportation order, the one from 2013, there's almost no information on her. She was picked up during a raid on a restaurant in Tampa, claimed to be Jamaican but had no documentation, was processed and deported within a week. The file is thin, incomplete, the kind of rushed case that happens when Immigration and Customs Enforcement is trying to hit deportation quotas." Maya's mind was reeling. "So there's another Maya Richardson. From Jamaica. And they thought I was her." Rebecca hesitated, then pulled out another document. "Maya, I need to ask you something. Do you have any relatives in Florida? Any family members who might have been in Tampa in 2013? Maya shook her head, confused. "No. My parents worked in Detroit. My extended family is all in Jamaica still. We don't have anyone in." She stopped. Her face changed. "Wait." Patricia looked at her. "What is it?" Maya's voice came out as barely a whisper. "I had a sister. Twin sister. We were separated when we came to the U.S. The silence in the room was absolute. Rebecca leaned forward. "Tell me everything." Maya's story came out in fragments, painful and halting. She and her identical twin Maria had been 5 years old when their parents fled Jamaica. The crossing was chaotic, arranged by smugglers, dangerous. The family was supposed to stay together, but there was an incident at the border. A raid, confusion, people scattering. Maya stayed with her parents. Maria was separated, taken by a different group. Their parents spent years trying to find her, working with immigration advocates and search organizations, but Maria had disappeared into the foster system under a different name. By the time Maya was 10, her parents had accepted that Maria was gone. They'd mourned her. They didn't speak about her much. The pain was too deep, too tangled with guilt and survivor's grief. Maya had buried the memory, focused on surviving, on building a life her twin never got to have. Rebecca was writing notes rapidly. When was the last time you heard anything about your sister? Maya shook her head. Never. After the separation we never found her. We don't know what happened to her. Rebecca looked down at the deportation file. Maya, I think we just found out what happened to her. The woman deported in 2013, the one listed as Maya Renee Richardson. I think that was your twin sister. The dates align. Tampa was a known destination for Jamaican migrants. And if she was in foster care under a different name, then got deported using a variation of your family name, that would explain the database match. The revelation hit Maya like a physical blow. Her sister. After all these years. Deported. The database match had pulled her sister's record, overlaid it onto Maya's life, and sent armed agents to her training facility without a single additional verification. No cross-check of dates of birth. No comparison of social security numbers. No review of the massive documentary evidence of Maya's citizenship. Just a name match and an assumption of guilt. Patricia's hand tightened on Maya's. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Maya couldn't speak. The grief was overwhelming. Grief for the sister she'd lost twice, first in the chaos of immigration and now in discovering she'd been deported, removed from the country that should have protected her. Grief for the system that had failed both of them. Grief for the childhood stolen, the years lost, the connection severed. And rage. Rage at immigration and customs enforcement for being so negligent, so careless with people's lives. Rage at the agents who'd stormed into her rink with their masks and their assumptions. Rage at a system that saw two Jamaican girls as interchangeable, as data points rather than human beings with separate lives and identities. Rebecca let Maya cry for several minutes before speaking again, her voice gentle but firm. Maya, this is more than just negligence. This is a pattern. Immigration and customs enforcement has a documented history of relying on flawed databases, outdated information, mistaken identities. Your case is extreme, but it's not unique. And the fact that your sister's story is connected to this, that adds a layer of human tragedy that transforms this from a bureaucratic error into something much bigger. I want to file a federal lawsuit. Fourth Amendment violations for unlawful seizure attempts. Fifth Amendment violations for due process denial. 14th Amendment violations for ethnic profiling. Emotional distress. Career impact. Punitive damages to deter future negligence. Patricia looked at Maya. It's your decision. But I think you should do it. Not just for yourself. For your sister. For every other person immigration and customs enforcement treats like this. Maya wiped her eyes, her voice stronger than she felt. How long will it take? I have to be in Milan in 2 days. Rebecca nodded. The lawsuit can be filed remotely. You can go to Milan. But when you come back, this fight will be waiting. And it won't be easy. Immigration and customs enforcement will try to defend their actions. They'll claim good faith. They'll try to settle quietly. But if you're willing to see this through to trial, if you're willing to make this public, we can win. And we can force systemic changes. Maya thought of the security footage, the images of her terrified on the ice, her coaches and friends forming a human barrier. She thought of her sister, deported and lost. She thought of every other person who didn't have the resources she had, who didn't have Patricia and Rebecca and Lou fighting for them. She thought of the anonymous tip, the cruelty of someone weaponizing immigration and customs enforcement against her. And she thought of Milan, of the Olympics, of the moment she'd worked her entire life for. She could walk away from this fight. She could focus on her skating, on her career, on moving forward. But that would mean nothing changed. That would mean the next Maya Richardson or Maria Richardson would face the same terror, the same injustice with no accountability. I'll do it, Maya said. File the lawsuit. Make it public. I want everyone to know what they did. What they do. Rebecca smiled, the first genuine smile since she'd arrived. Good. Then let's get to work. The security footage leaked that night, though leaked might not be the right word. Lou released it deliberately, uploading it to multiple platforms with a caption that read, Olympic athletes' coaches form human shield against IC raid. 3 days before the Winter Olympics. This is what happens when anonymous tips replace due process. The video was stark, undeniable. 30 seconds of high-definition footage showing the Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents entering the rink, Patricia positioning herself between them and Maya, the human barrier forming, the standoff, the agents radioing for backup, Maya visible on the ice in the background, clearly terrified. The footage had everything: drama, injustice, ordinary people standing up to armed federal agents, and the sympathetic figure of an Olympic athlete being targeted days before competition. It went viral within hours. By midnight, it had been shared across educator networks, immigrant rights groups, sports communities, news outlets. By morning it had millions of views. The headlines appeared at dawn, each one more inflammatory than the last. ICE raids Olympic training facility days before games. Coaches form human barrier to protect black figure skater from federal agents. Anonymous tip leads to immigration raid on U.S. citizen athlete. Viral video shows shocking ICE overreach at Detroit ice rink. The story spread with the speed and intensity of wildfire, amplified by the visual power of the footage, the relatability of coaches protecting their athlete, the emotional punch of watching someone's Olympic dream nearly destroyed by bureaucratic negligence. Maya woke up to discover she was trending on every social media platform. Her phone was flooded with messages. Supportive, hateful, confused. News requests. Interview requests. Her Instagram had gained 200,000 followers overnight. There were hashtags. #StandWithMaya, #JusticeForMaya, #ICOverreach. The USA Figure Skating Organization released a statement condemning the raid and confirming Maya would be competing in Milan as scheduled, with full organizational support. The Olympic Committee issued their own statement expressing concern about the disruption to an athlete's preparation and calling for an investigation into Immigration and Customs Enforcement's procedures. But the response wasn't universally positive. The comments sections filled with the predictable ugliness of internet discourse. Some people praised the coaches for their solidarity, called them heroes, shared their own stories of immigration enforcement overreach. Others accused Maya of being ungrateful, of playing the victim, claimed she must have done something to warrant investigation, suggested the whole thing was staged for attention. The racist comments were vicious, attacking her appearance, her background, questioning why someone who looked like that was representing America. The hate was overwhelming, a deluge of cruelty that made Maya's hands shake as she scrolled through her phone. Patricia found her that morning, sitting in the rink lobby staring at her screen, tears streaming down her face. "Stop reading those," Patricia said gently, taking the phone away. "They don't matter. The people who love you matter. The people who stood with you matter. The racists and trolls? They've already lost." Maya shook her head. "How can you say that? They're saying I'm lying. That I deserved it. That I should be grateful Immigration and Customs Enforcement didn't arrest me." Patricia knelt down, looking Maya in the eyes. "Because in 2 days you're going to step onto that ice in Milan and you're going to skate the performance of your life. And all those people spewing hate. They'll still be sitting behind their keyboards while you're standing on an Olympic podium. That's how they've lost." The media requests were relentless. Every major news outlet wanted interviews. CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, NPR, The New York Times, The Washington Post. Rebecca advised being selective, choosing outlets that would tell the story accurately rather than sensationalize it. Maya agreed to do one interview, with a respected sports journalist who'd covered her rise through the competitive ranks, someone she trusted. The interview aired that evening, a 10-minute segment where Maya spoke clearly and honestly about the terror of the raid, the shock of discovering the mistaken identity, the grief of learning about her sister's deportation. She spoke about her citizenship, about her documentation, about her love for representing the United States. And she spoke about the lawsuit, about her determination to hold Immigration and Customs Enforcement accountable. Landing in Milan should have been exciting. The culmination of years of work, the beginning of the Olympic experience. But Maya felt numb. She went through the motions of checking into the Olympic Village, attending orientation sessions, unpacking her gear. The village was vibrant, chaotic, filled with athletes from every nation, every sport, all of them buzzing with nervous energy. Maya moved through it like a ghost. Patricia watched her carefully, noting the disconnect. "You need to find a way to be present," she said one evening. "I know what you went through. I know it's still raw. But if you skate in Milan the way you've been skating in practice this week, you won't medal. And those bastards at Immigration and Customs Enforcement will have taken this from you too." The words stung because they were true. Maya's practice sessions in Milan had been technically proficient but emotionally flat. She was executing the moves but not embodying them. Figure skating at the Olympic level wasn't just about technique. It was about artistry, about emotional connection, about making the audience feel something. And right now, Maya felt nothing except a low-grade terror that Immigration and Customs Enforcement might be waiting for her when she returned to the U.S. She couldn't shake the image of the masked agents, couldn't stop hearing the lead agent's words. "This isn't over." 3 days before her short program, Maya had a breakthrough. She was in her room at the Olympic Village, scrolling through messages of support on her phone, when she came across a post from someone claiming to be her sister's foster mother. The woman wrote that she'd seen the news coverage, had recognized the story, wanted Maya to know that she'd cared for Maria for 2 years before the girl had aged out of the system. She included a photo, grainy, faded, but unmistakably Maya's twin. Same eyes. Same smile. Same presence. Maya stared at the photo for 20 minutes, tears streaming down her face. This was real. Maria had existed. She'd been real. And the system had failed her. Maya called Rebecca, who immediately began investigating the claim. Within hours she'd verified it. The woman was legitimate, had indeed fostered Maria, had tried to adopt her but been denied due to immigration status complications. Maria had aged out of foster care at 18, had worked under the table for years, had been caught in the Tampa raid and deported before anyone could intervene. The woman had lost track of her after the deportation, hadn't known what happened. Rebecca passed along the foster mother's contact information. Maya called her that night and they spoke for 2 hours. The woman shared memories of Maria, her love of music, her stubbornness, her dreams of becoming a nurse. She shared that Maria had asked about her biological family, had wondered if she had siblings, had carried a grief she couldn't name. She shared that Maria had been deported using the name Maya Richardson because she'd found the family name somehow, had been trying to reclaim it when Immigration and Customs Enforcement picked her up. The conversation broke something open in Maya. The numbness cracked. The grief poured out, but so did something else: determination. Her sister had fought to reclaim their family name. Had tried to belong. Had been deported for the crime of existing while undocumented, while trying to find her place in the world. And now that same system, that same agency had come after Maya, had tried to erase her too. But Maya had something her sister hadn't: resources, visibility, a platform. And she was going to use every bit of it. The next morning, Maya skated her practice session with a ferocity Patricia hadn't seen in weeks. The triple axel was perfect. The spins were flawless. The artistry was back, raw, powerful, infused with emotion that resonated across the rink. Other coaches stopped to watch. Athletes from other countries paused their training to stare. This wasn't just technical perfection. This was someone skating with purpose, with fury, with love and grief and determination all woven together. Patricia watched with tears in her eyes. "That's it," she whispered. "That's my champion." Maya's short program was scheduled for a Thursday evening. The arena was packed, thousands of spectators, millions watching worldwide. She stood backstage in her costume, deep purple, covered in crystals, designed to catch the light with every movement. She could hear the crowd, could feel the weight of expectation. But instead of fear, she felt clarity. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about her sister. About every person Immigration and Customs Enforcement had targeted. About proving that she belonged, that she deserved to be here, that no amount of masked agents or bureaucratic cruelty could take this moment from her. Her name was called. She skated onto the ice to thunderous applause. The music started, something classical building slowly. Maya positioned herself, took a breath and began. From the first moment, it was clear this was something special. Her movements were precise but emotional, technically perfect but alive with feeling. The triple axel was breathtaking, high, fast, clean. The spins were crystalline. The footwork was intricate, mesmerizing. She skated like someone who had everything to prove and nothing to lose, like someone channeling years of pain and hope and fight into 3 minutes of perfection. When she finished, the crowd erupted. Standing ovation. Flowers raining onto the ice. Patricia was crying. The scores came back. Personal best. First place after the short program. Maya stood on the ice, breathing hard, tears streaming down her face, and thought, "This is for you, Maria. This is for both of us." The free skate was 2 days later. Maya needed to stay in first place to secure gold. The pressure was immense. Every athlete was throwing their most difficult combinations, pushing for technical perfection. But Maya wasn't thinking about scores. She was thinking about the footage of the raid. About her sister's photo. About the lawsuit waiting for her back home. About making this moment count. Her free skate program was her masterpiece. 4 minutes of technical difficulty and emotional depth, choreographed to tell a story of separation, loss, reunion. Every jump was a battle. Every spin was a triumph. She skated for herself and her sister, for her parents who'd sacrificed everything, for Patricia and Lou and Rebecca and everyone who'd stood in that barrier protecting her. She landed her final combination jump and the arena lost its mind. The ovation was deafening, sustained, refusing to end. Maya skated to the barrier where Patricia was waiting, collapsed into her arms and sobbed. The scores came back. Gold medal. By a significant margin. Team USA's first women's figure skating gold in 16 years. Maya Richardson, Jamaican-American, Detroit-born, sister to Maria, survivor of immigration and customs enforcement overreach, Olympic champion. Maya returned to the United States a hero. The airport in Detroit was mobbed. Thousands of people waiting to welcome her home, holding signs chanting her name. Her parents were there weeping with pride. Lou and the entire rink staff. Students from her childhood skating programs. Local politicians wanting photo opportunities. And Rebecca standing slightly apart, waiting to discuss the lawsuit that was now proceeding in federal court. The media attention was overwhelming. Everyone wanted a piece of the story. The Olympic gold, the immigration and customs enforcement raid, the lost sister, the triumphant return. Maya did a handful of interviews, carefully managed by Rebecca, always bringing the conversation back to accountability, to systemic reform, to the lawsuit. She wasn't going to let the Olympic victory become a feel-good story that buried the injustice. She was going to use her platform to force change. The lawsuit had been filed while she was in Milan. Immigration and Customs Enforcement and the Department of Homeland Security were named as defendants. The charges were comprehensive: Fourth Amendment violations for unlawful seizure attempts, Fifth Amendment violations for due process denial, 14th Amendment violations for ethnic profiling and discriminatory enforcement. Emotional distress. Career impact from the disrupted training. Punitive damages designed to deter future negligence. Rebecca had assembled a legal team that included immigration specialists, constitutional scholars, and civil rights attorneys. They were preparing for war. Discovery began within weeks, and what it revealed was damning. Internal immigration and customs enforcement emails showed that agents had proceeded on a name match alone, that they'd ignored protocols requiring multi-point verification, that supervisors had approved the raid without reviewing Maya's publicly available information. Her status as an Olympic athlete, her birth in Detroit, her extensive documentation. The emails revealed a culture of shortcuts and quota-driven enforcement, where speed mattered more than accuracy, where the benefit of the doubt was never given to people with foreign-sounding names or darker skin. Agent depositions were devastating. The lead agent admitted under oath that he'd never verified Maya's social security number before raiding the rink. He admitted that he'd known she was an Olympic athlete but had assumed athletes can be undocumented too. He admitted that the administrative warrant was based solely on the database match, that no additional investigation had been conducted. When asked why he hadn't simply called USA Figure Skating to verify her status, he had no answer. When asked why he'd proceeded with a raid instead of a verification request, he claimed he was following standard protocols. When presented with Immigration and Customs Enforcement's own guidelines requiring multiple verification points before enforcement actions, he admitted he hadn't followed them. Other depositions revealed systemic failures. Database administrators admitted that the system flagged name matches without cross-referencing dates of birth, social security numbers, or other identifying information. Supervisors acknowledged that field verification tools existed but weren't required, that agents had discretion to proceed on partial information. Training records showed that agents received minimal instruction on handling U.S. citizens, on the constitutional requirements for detention, on the importance of verification before enforcement. The picture that emerged was of an agency operating with reckless disregard for individual rights, prioritizing numbers over accuracy, speed over justice. The defense attempted to argue good faith, that the agents had acted on the information available to them, that the database match had been credible enough to warrant investigation, that Maya's refusal to cooperate had complicated verification. Rebecca tore these arguments apart methodically. Good faith requires reasonable diligence. The agents had done none. The database match should have been the beginning of verification, not the end. And Maya had every constitutional right to refuse cooperation without counsel, especially when being approached by armed agents who'd provided no evidence of legitimate authority. Expert witnesses testified for the prosecution. Constitutional scholars explained the Fourth Amendment requirements for probable cause, the necessity of particularized suspicion, the unconstitutionality of relying on generalized databases without individualized verification. Immigration attorneys detailed the pattern of mistaken identities, of U.S. citizens being detained, of lives disrupted by immigration and customs enforcement's failures. A former immigration and customs enforcement supervisor, now a vocal critic of the agency, testified about the internal culture, the pressure to meet deportation quotas, the rewards for aggressive enforcement, the lack of consequences for mistakes. A database security expert explained how easy it would have been to cross-reference additional identifiers, how negligent it was to proceed without doing so. Maya testified on the 8th day of trial. She wore a simple suit, her Olympic gold medal pinned to her lapel, a subtle but powerful reminder of who she was, what she'd achieved despite immigration and customs enforcement's attempts to derail her. She spoke clearly without theatrics, recounting the terror of the raid, the humiliation of being targeted in her training facility, the trauma that had affected her preparation for the Olympics. She described the collapse on the ice after the agents left, the nightmares that followed, the difficulty concentrating during practice, the emotional toll of discovering her sister's deportation. Then she revealed the detail that transformed the courtroom atmosphere. Her identical twin sister, separated during immigration, lost to foster care, deported under a mistaken identity years earlier. She explained how the database match that had sent agents after her was actually her sister's deportation record, how immigration and customs enforcement had failed to distinguish between two separate people, had treated them as interchangeable. She spoke about Maria's life, about the foster mother's memories, about her sister's dreams that had been crushed by the same system now on trial. The emotional weight was overwhelming. Jurors leaned forward, several crying openly. The defense attorneys looked visibly uncomfortable. This wasn't just bureaucratic error anymore. This was human tragedy, systemic failure made visceral and personal. Cross-examination attempted to poke holes in Maya's story. Defense counsel suggested she'd overreacted to a routine verification visit, that the emotional distress was exaggerated, that the Olympic disruption was minimal since she'd won gold anyway. Rebecca objected repeatedly, but Maya handled herself with grace. She explained that winning gold didn't erase the trauma, that success despite adversity wasn't the same as success without it, that the agent's actions had nearly cost her everything she'd worked for. She pointed out that if Patricia and Lou and the others hadn't stood up to immigration and customs enforcement, if she'd been detained that morning, she would have missed the Olympics entirely. The defense had no effective response. Student athletes from Maya's childhood programs testified about the impact of her story, about how seeing her targeted had made them afraid, about the chilling effect on immigrant communities when even documented citizens weren't safe from enforcement actions. USA figure skating officials testified about the disruption to Olympic preparation, about the resources required to provide legal support and security, about the broader implications for athlete safety. Patricia testified about Maya's deteriorated training after the raid, about the visible trauma, about the coaching adjustments required to get her back to competitive form. Lou testified about the rink security upgrades, about the fear among immigrant families whose children trained there, about lost business and damaged community trust. The defense called its own witnesses. immigration experts who defended the use of administrative warrants, who argued that field agents couldn't be expected to conduct exhaustive verification for every enforcement action, who suggested that the fault lay with the database systems rather than the agents themselves. But these witnesses withered under cross-examination. Rebecca forced them to acknowledge that Maya's case involved easily verifiable public information, that a single phone call could have prevented the raid, that the agent's failure to exercise basic due diligence was indefensible regardless of database limitations. Closing arguments lasted a full day. Rebecca's presentation was masterful, a systematic breakdown of each constitutional violation, each moment of negligence, each failure of oversight. She played the security footage again, letting the jury watch Maya's terror, the human barrier forming the agent's aggression. She displayed the deportation record for Maria Richardson alongside Maya's citizenship documentation, making the mistaken identity visually undeniable. She presented the timeline of Maya's Olympic preparation, showing exactly how close immigration and customs enforcement had come to destroying an athlete's lifetime of work. And she spoke about Maria, the lost sister, the forgotten victim, the human cost of enforcement without accountability. The defense's closing argument was weaker, relying heavily on the good faith defense, on the idea that agents had followed available procedures, that mistakes happen in complex systems. But the evidence overwhelmed these claims. The jury had seen the emails, heard the depositions, witnessed Maya's testimony. They'd seen the pattern of negligence, the reckless disregard for verification, the systemic failures that enabled this injustice. Jury deliberation lasted 2 days. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous on all counts. Liability established for Fourth Amendment violations. Liability for Fifth Amendment violations. Liability for 14th Amendment violations and discriminatory enforcement. The compensatory damages were set at $4.2 million, for emotional distress, for career impact, for the trauma inflicted on Maya and the disruption to her Olympic preparation. The punitive damages were set at $7.5 million, designed to send a message to immigration and customs enforcement that constitutional rights couldn't be violated with impunity, that shortcuts and negligence would carry real consequences. Total award, $11.7 million. The courtroom erupted. Maya collapsed into Rebecca's arms, sobbing. Patricia was crying. Lou was cheering. Immigration and customs enforcement attorneys sat in stunned silence. The verdict made headlines within minutes. Olympic gold medalist wins $11.7 million in IC raid lawsuit. Jury awards record damages for immigration enforcement overreach. Maya Richardson's victory in court matches Olympic triumph. The story dominated news cycles for days, forcing national conversations about immigration enforcement, about accountability, about the human cost of broken systems. The aftermath was swift and public. 3 immigration and customs enforcement agents were terminated within a week of the verdict. The lead agent and the supervisor who'd approved the raid without verification. The young agent who'd attempted to push past Marcus. 2 supervisors were demoted, their decision-making authority restricted. Immigration and Customs Enforcement announced policy reforms, new protocols requiring multiple identity verification points before any school or workplace enforcement action, mandatory judicial review for raids on educational or athletic facilities, expanded training on constitutional rights and citizenship verification. The reforms were significant, driven by the visibility of Maya's case, the undeniable evidence of systemic failure captured on security footage and in internal documents. Schools and training facilities nationwide adopted Maya's story as a case study. Lincoln High School in Minneapolis, site of Caroline Augustine's similar ordeal, reached out to Maya about coordinating advocacy efforts. Athletic organizations updated their security protocols, trained staff on responding to enforcement actions, established legal defense funds for athletes facing similar situations. The Olympic Committee issued new guidelines protecting athletes from harassment and emphasizing the importance of due process. The changes were real, measurable, more than symbolic gestures. Maya used a portion of her settlement to establish the Maria Richardson Legal Defense Fund, named for her sister, dedicated to providing free legal representation to immigrants and U.S. citizens facing wrongful detention or enforcement overreach. She partnered with Rebecca's firm and multiple immigrant rights organizations, funding training sessions for community members on their rights during immigration and customs enforcement encounters, creating rapid response legal teams, supporting legislative advocacy for database reforms. The fund grew quickly, supported by donations from across the country, from people who'd watched the viral footage and Maya's Olympic performances and felt compelled to contribute to lasting change. She also funded a search for her sister. Immigration and Customs Enforcement records showed Maria had been deported to Jamaica in 2013, but the trail went cold after that. Maya hired investigators, worked with Jamaican advocacy organizations, publicized Maria's story in Caribbean media. Months passed with no leads, and Maya had to accept the possibility that her sister might never be found, that she might have died or disappeared into another system. But she refused to stop looking. Every interview she gave, she mentioned Maria. Every public appearance, she carried her sister's memory. The search became part of her identity, part of the platform she was building. 6 months after the verdict, Maya was invited to testify before Congress about immigration enforcement reform. She sat before the House Judiciary Committee in a simple blue suit, her gold medal again pinned to her lapel, and told her story to elected officials and millions watching on C-SPAN. She spoke about the terror of the raid, the constitutional violations, the mistaken identity, her lost sister, the systemic failures that enabled injustice. She made specific policy recommendations: mandatory multi-point verification before enforcement actions, judicial oversight for all detention warrants, independent review boards for complaints, financial liability for agencies that violate citizens' rights. Several representatives thanked her for her courage. Others tried to defend immigration and customs enforcement, arguing that agents were doing difficult work under challenging circumstances. Maya's response was measured but firm. Difficult work doesn't excuse constitutional violations. Challenges don't justify negligence. My sister and I deserved better. Every person in this country deserves better. The testimony went viral just like the original footage. Maya's composed eloquence, her refusal to back down from tough questions, her ability to speak to complex policy issues while maintaining her personal connection to the story, all of it reinforced her role as not just an athlete but an advocate. She was building something beyond her skating career, something that would outlast her competitive years. She continued skating though her relationship to the sport had changed. She won world championships again the following year, but the hunger was different now. It wasn't about proving she belonged anymore. It was about using her platform while she had it, about maximizing her visibility to drive the advocacy work that had become her purpose. She did exhibition performances to raise money for the Legal Defense Fund. She spoke at universities about justice and accountability. She wrote an autobiography that became a bestseller, with proceeds going to immigrant support organizations. She was building a legacy that transcended athletic achievement. 2 years after the raid, Maya received a call that changed everything. An investigator in Kingston had found a woman matching Maria's description, working at a hospital, using a different name. DNA testing confirmed it, her sister. Alive. Maya flew to Jamaica immediately, accompanied by Rebecca and her parents. The reunion was private, emotional, covered only by select media who'd agreed to Maya's terms about privacy and dignity. The sisters met in a quiet room face to face for the first time since they were 5 years old. They looked identical, moved identically, but had lived completely different lives. The conversation was halting at first, grief and joy and loss all tangled together. But by the end of the day they were sitting side by side, hands clasped, beginning the long process of knowing each other. Maya brought Maria back to the United States legally, working with immigration attorneys to navigate the complex process of reversing the unjust deportation, establishing Maria's right to return, helping her rebuild a life in the country that had expelled her. It took months of legal work, but eventually Maria was granted lawful permanent residence with a path to citizenship. She moved to Detroit, enrolled in nursing school, the dream she'd carried since childhood. The sisters appeared together on national television, telling their full story, making the abstract impact of immigration policy devastatingly personal. The interview was powerful, watched by millions. Maya and Maria sat together, finishing each other's sentences, their identical features making the separation even more poignant. They spoke about their childhood memories of Jamaica, about the terrifying night of separation, about the years of not knowing if the other survived. Maria spoke about foster care, about aging out of the system, about trying to find work without documentation, about the Tampa raid that had ended with deportation. Maya spoke about the guilt of having the life her sister didn't, about channeling that into her skating, about the raid that had finally revealed what happened to Maria. Together they spoke about the failures of systems designed to separate rather than unite families, about the human cost of enforcement prioritizing speed over accuracy, about the changes still needed to prevent other families from experiencing their pain. The interview sparked renewed calls for immigration reform. Legislators who'd been on the fence about policy changes found themselves moved by the sisters' story. Public opinion shifted perceptibly, with even conservative outlets acknowledging the injustice of the Richardson sisters' separation and the negligence of Maya's raid. The case became a touchstone in debates about enforcement practices, about the need for accountability, about balancing security concerns with human dignity. Maya retired from competitive skating at 26, choosing to leave on her own terms, with Olympic gold and multiple world championships to her name. Her retirement press conference wasn't about her athletic achievements, though. It was about announcing the next phase of her work, a nonprofit organization dedicated to reuniting families separated by immigration enforcement, to providing legal support for wrongful detention cases, to advocating for systemic reforms. Maria would serve as the organization's co-director, using her lived experience to guide their work. Patricia joined as an advisor. Rebecca provided legal expertise. Lou helped with fundraising. The team that had stood in that barrier at the Detroit Ice Arena was reuniting for a different kind of fight. The organization called Barrier, named for that human shield that had protected Maya, grew rapidly. Within its first year, it had helped reunite 14 families separated by deportation. It had provided legal representation to 37 individuals facing wrongful detention. It had trained 2,000 community members on their rights during immigration and customs enforcement encounters. It had successfully lobbied for state-level legislation in Michigan requiring judicial warrants for all immigration enforcement actions at schools and healthcare facilities. The work was relentless, exhausting, often heartbreaking. But it was work that mattered, that created tangible change in people's lives. Maya was invited to speak at countless events, universities, conferences, advocacy gatherings. She always accepted when her schedule allowed, always told her full story, always pivoted from personal narrative to policy advocacy. She was careful not to let her platform become about her individual triumph over adversity. She emphasized the structural issues, the systemic failures, the need for accountability at institutional levels. She spoke about the people who didn't have her resources, her visibility, her legal team. She used her privilege as an Olympic champion to amplify voices that were often ignored. On the 5-year anniversary of the raid, the Detroit Ice Arena held a ceremony. A bronze plaque was installed at the entrance, engraved with the names of everyone who'd stood in that barrier: Patricia, Lou, Derek, Sarah, Elena, Marcus, and the words, "Here we stood united, protecting our own." Maya spoke at the unveiling, surrounded by the people who'd saved her that morning. She talked about the power of ordinary people making extraordinary choices, about the courage it takes to stand up to institutional authority, about the ripples of impact from single moments of solidarity. She announced that the rink would now offer free skating lessons to children from immigrant families, funded by a grant from Barrier, ensuring that the next generation wouldn't face the same barriers she had. The plaque became a destination. People visited the rink specifically to see it, to stand where that barrier had formed, to take photos, to reflect on what it meant to protect each other. Teachers brought students on field trips to discuss civil disobedience and constitutional rights. Activists organized around it as a symbol of resistance. It was remarkable how a single morning, a single choice by a handful of people, had become something larger, something enduring. Immigration and customs enforcement reforms, forced by Maya's lawsuit and the public pressure that followed, showed measurable results. Wrongful detention cases decreased by 40% in the 3 years following the verdict. Complaints about constitutional violations dropped by 35%. The multi-point verification protocols prevented hundreds of mistaken identity cases. The reforms weren't perfect. Enforcement was still aggressive, still disproportionately targeted communities of color, but the changes were real and meaningful. Maya's case had created precedent that other attorneys used in subsequent lawsuits. It had shifted the conversation about accountability. It had proven that even powerful federal agencies could be held responsible for their failures. Maya continued her relationship with Caroline Augustine, the teacher from Minneapolis who'd experienced a similar raid years earlier. They spoke regularly, collaborated on advocacy work, appeared together at events. Their parallel stories, both naturalized citizens, both targeted based on flawed data, both protected by colleagues forming human barriers, demonstrated that these weren't isolated incidents but patterns requiring systemic solutions. Together, they pushed for federal legislation mandating database reforms, requiring annual audits of immigration enforcement actions, creating independent oversight boards. The legislation faced resistance, but their advocacy kept pressure on lawmakers, kept the issue visible. 10 years after the raid, Maya was 33. Maria was a registered nurse, working at the same Detroit hospital where she'd been born. Their parents were retired, finally able to rest after decades of grinding work. Patricia was still coaching, though she'd scaled back, focusing on young skaters from underserved communities. Rebecca had become one of the nation's leading immigration rights attorneys. Lou had retired from the rink but remained active in community organizing. The team from that morning had gone on to continue fighting, each in their own way. Maya was asked frequently if she regretted how everything had unfolded, if she wished she could have avoided the trauma of the raid and the lawsuit. Her answer was always the same: I wish my sister and I had never been separated. I wish Immigration and Customs Enforcement had done their job properly and never targeted me. But I don't regret fighting back. I don't regret the lawsuit. I don't regret using my platform to force change. Because if I'd stayed silent, if I'd just moved on and focused on my career, nothing would have changed. The next Maya Richardson would have faced the same terror. The next Maria Richardson would have been deported and lost. This work, this fight for accountability and justice, it's the most important thing I've ever done. More important than any medal. The story of Maya Richardson became a case study in law schools, in social justice courses, in sports management programs. It was taught as an example of how individual litigation could drive systemic reform, how visibility could be leveraged for advocacy, how trauma could be transformed into purpose. Students watched the security footage, read the court transcripts, analyzed the policy changes that followed. They debated the effectiveness of legal approaches versus grassroots organizing, the role of media attention in justice movements, the ethics of using personal tragedy as public platform. Maya occasionally guest lectured in these classes, always emphasizing that her case was exceptional because of her resources and visibility, that thousands of others faced similar injustice without the support she'd had, that the work of reform required sustained attention to structural issues rather than individual success stories. The viral footage from that morning, 30 seconds that had sparked everything, remained one of the most shared videos in internet history. It was used in documentaries about immigration enforcement, about athletic achievement against adversity, about the power of collective action. It had been viewed hundreds of millions of times, shared across every platform, referenced in countless articles and think pieces. That footage, more than anything else, had made the abstract concrete, had shown people what enforcement overreach looked like, what solidarity looked like, what courage looked like. It remained visceral and powerful, impossible to watch without emotional response. Maya sometimes watched that footage herself, usually late at night when insomnia kept her awake. She'd watch herself on the ice, frozen in terror, and remember exactly how that moment felt. The cold seeping through her skates, the adrenaline spiking, the disbelief that this was happening. She'd watch Patricia step into the barrier, watch the others join, watch the standoff unfold. And she'd think about how easily it could have gone differently. If Lou hadn't been there. If the cameras hadn't been rolling. If Patricia hadn't been willing to risk everything. The contingency of it all. How close she'd come to being detained, to missing the Olympics, to never finding her sister. It still took her breath away. But then she'd remember what came after. The gold medal. The lawsuit victory. The policy reforms. The families reunited through barriers work. The lives changed because people had witnessed her story and been moved to act. The legacy being built. And she'd remember that trauma didn't have to be the end of the story. That injustice could be the beginning of change. That what had been done to her and her sister, while inexcusable and devastating, had also created an opportunity to prevent it from happening to others. Maya Richardson's story, from that frozen morning at the Detroit Ice Arena to Olympic gold to landmark legal victory to sustained advocacy, became more than a personal narrative. It became a testament to the power of standing together, of refusing to accept injustice quietly, of transforming pain into purpose. It proved that ordinary people making extraordinary choices in critical moments could shift the trajectory of institutions. It demonstrated that visibility, while not sufficient for justice, could be a powerful tool when combined with strategic action and sustained commitment. And it showed that healing from trauma didn't require forgetting or forgiving. It required channeling that experience into preventing future harm, into building systems that valued human dignity over bureaucratic efficiency, into ensuring that the next generation wouldn't face the same fights. The plaque at the Detroit Ice Arena remained a symbol, but the real monument was the work continuing every day. The families reunited, the wrongful detentions prevented, the policies reformed, the lives protected. That morning, when 6 masked agents burst into a training facility and were met by 7 people refusing to move, something shifted. Not immediately. Not completely. But enough. Enough to matter. Enough to build on. Enough to prove that resistance was possible, that accountability could be demanded, that justice, while slow and incomplete and requiring constant vigilance, was achievable. Maya Richardson stood on ice and on principle, and she won both times. Her story would be told for generations, studied and debated and referenced, a reminder of what's possible when people refuse to accept that power is immutable and injustice inevitable. She turned a moment of terror into a movement for change. And in doing so, she honored her sister, her community, her coaches, and herself. The frozen sanctuary of that Detroit rink had become a launching point for something larger, something enduring, something that would outlast any individual achievement or accolade. This was justice as method, not spectacle. Truth as endurance, not performance. Power reclaimed through the slow, deliberate work of holding systems accountable, of refusing to be erased, of standing together when it mattered most. The story, like the work, continued.